In a world where everyone is desperate to be liked, to be followed, to be invited, choosing to walk alone is the loudest act of power you can ever commit. Because while the crowd runs from silence, you walk into it like it's home. This message is for the few who are not afraid to outgrow shallow friendships, who are done lowering their standards just to be accepted, who are tired of pretending to enjoy conversations that starve the soul. This message is for those who see the world clearly and still choose to walk with honor, even if it means walking alone. Not everyone is going to like this message. Good. It's not for everyone. It's for the ones who refuse to sell themselves just to feel included. So if you've ever wondered why it feels like you don't fit in, why people drift away from you, or why you're always the one listening more than speaking, there's nothing wrong with you. You just see life with uncommon clarity, and that clarity has a cost. Number 1, you don't follow the crowd. Because you've realized the crowd often runs in circles. They laugh loud but mean nothing. They party hard but feel empty. They scroll endlessly, seeking dopamine, not truth. Their lives are built around appearances, not substance. They chase trends to avoid confronting the void within, and you see it. You see how the smiles are strained, how the laughter is hollow, how the weekend high is followed by a weekday crash. You see how people wear masks even around their closest friends, because the truth is too raw to share. You've witnessed people burn their own boundaries just to be accepted by people who wouldn't notice if they disappeared. That's not connection, that's performance. You've watched people surround themselves with noise to escape the silence of their own thoughts. And you refuse to play along. You refuse to join conversations that cost you your energy and reward you with nothing but surface validation. You're not moved by invitations to places where the volume is high and the value is low. You don't smile just to be polite when the conversation insults your intelligence. You've stopped pretending you enjoy the company of people who drain your soul. And yes, that makes you different. That makes you the quiet one, the loner, the one who's too serious. But it also makes you honest, grounded, awake, and people like that are rare. You see the patterns others pretend don't exist. You see how approval is the new drug. How many people base their self-worth on reactions, not reality. You see how relationships today are built on attention, not intention. People don't want to connect, they want to be admired. They don't want a conversation, they want a stage. You've outgrown the stage, you've outgrown the need to be seen, because you've started seeing yourself. You've watched people collapse emotionally because someone didn't text them back. You've seen grown adults spiral into anxiety because they weren't included in a group chat. And you ask yourself, how did we become so weak? The answer is simple. Distraction has replaced direction. Comfort has replaced character. Attention has replaced authenticity. But not for you. You've felt the itch to please, to blend in, to conform, and you chose something harder. You chose self-respect over popularity. You chose depth over dopamine. You chose clarity over clout. That's why you don't follow the crowd, because the crowd isn't thinking, they're reacting. The crowd isn't learning, they're performing. The crowd isn't living, they're escaping. So you walk a different road. Not because it's easy, but because it's real. And on that road, you lose people. You lose the friends who only knew the old version of you. You lose the social circles that demand you shrink to fit in. You lose the comfort of always having somewhere to be, even if being there meant lying to yourself. But what you gain in return is everything. You gain your time. You gain your peace. You gain your self-respect. You gain the ability to sit in silence and not feel the urge to fill it with nonsense. You gain clarity that cuts through manipulation like a blade. You gain the ability to spot fake love from across the room. You gain power, not the kind that screams, the kind that doesn't need to. And that power grows, quietly, consistently. While everyone else is busy shouting for attention, you're building something they can't see, yet. You're building the kind of strength that doesn't flinch under pressure, the kind of wisdom that doesn't chase, the kind of presence that doesn't need approval to exist. So while others gather followers, you gather truth. While they collect likes, you collect clarity. While they chase relevance, you build resilience. And yes, it gets lonely sometimes, because when you stop trying to fit in, the people who liked the version of you that wasn't true, they vanish. But so do the lies, so do the compromises, so does the pressure to perform. And in that emptiness, something new appears: freedom. The freedom to choose who you let into your life. The freedom to walk away without guilt. The freedom to say no without explaining yourself. The freedom to live in alignment with your values, even if no one else understands them. That's why you don't follow the crowd, because you've finally realized the price of belonging to everyone is never truly belonging to yourself. So now you protect your peace like it's gold. You decline invitations that don't feel aligned. You avoid places that poison your spirit. You don't chase after people who left you on red. You don't try to prove your worth to people who never had the eyes to see it. You've stopped explaining your boundaries. You've started enforcing them. You don't apologize for having standards. You don't feel guilty for outgrowing people who chose comfort over growth. You don't water yourself down to keep someone else comfortable in their stagnation. And now your life feels different. Quieter? Yes, but also more powerful, because you're no longer outsourcing your peace to the approval of people who haven't even mastered their own chaos. You've stopped trading your truth for temporary connection. You've stopped investing in people who only show up when it's easy. You've stopped romanticizing the crowd, because you know what it costs. And you've started romanticizing your solitude, because you know what it gives. So when people ask, "Why don't you come around anymore?" you smile, not because you're being rude, but because you no longer owe your presence to people who never earned your energy. Number 2, you think deeper than most. You notice things others dismiss. You feel energies others ignore. You ask questions that silence a room. You're not trying to be intense. Your mind just doesn't settle for shallow. You're not interested in small talk when your soul craves meaning. When someone lies, you feel it before they finish their sentence. When a room shifts in energy, your body knows before your brain catches up. You don't need evidence, you sense truth. That's why gossip disgusts you. That's why meaningless laughter exhausts you. That's why crowds make you feel lonelier than solitude. You were never built for popularity. You were built for purpose. And deep thinking doesn't just come with insight. It comes with pain. The kind of pain that comes from seeing through people, through situations, through illusions. It's not a gift for the weak. You understand human psychology not because you studied it, but because you've lived it. You've seen how people manipulate, how they lie with a smile, how they project their insecurities onto others and call it honesty. You've seen people build their confidence on the approval of strangers and fall apart when that approval disappears. And maybe that used to be you, until you realize that no amount of external praise can heal internal confusion. You understand that most people don't want the truth. They want comfort. They want echo chambers. They want to feel good, not get better. That's why your honesty offends them. That's why your silence intimidates them. That's why your presence makes them uncomfortable. Because people who've never faced their shadow are scared of those who have. You think deeper because you've suffered deeper. And you've chosen to learn instead of run. You've chosen to grow instead of blame. You've chosen to be conscious instead of comfortable. You look at how easily people fall into emotional slavery, how they need someone to like them to feel worthy, how they change who they are to avoid judgment, how they kill their potential just to avoid rejection. And you refuse to live that way. You don't chase validation. You question it. You don't beg to be liked. You investigate why you cared in the first place. You don't become what's trending. You remain what's true. And that truth, that internal loyalty, makes you dangerous, not to good people, but to the ones who can't manipulate you anymore. Because the deeper you think, the harder you are to control. The more you question, the harder you are to fool. The more you reflect, the less you react. And this level of awareness? It's not common, it's not popular, it's not fun, but it's worth it. Because you no longer give your peace to people who can't even control their own chaos. You no longer trust someone's words just because they sound nice. You look at actions, patterns, energy. You trust your gut more than someone's mask. That's why your circle is small. That's why you'd rather spend a Friday night alone than surrounded by people who don't even know who they are. That's why you walk away when the vibe is off, even if there's no proof. You don't need a reason, you just need your truth. Because the moment you start betraying your intuition to fit in, you start burying your power. And that power, it only grows in silence. So you stay quiet when needed. You observe more than you speak. You process more than you post. You'd rather be misunderstood for being deep than praised for being shallow. Because the kind of life you're building doesn't need to be explained. It needs to be protected. That's what deep thinkers do. They protect their mind, their space, and their energy like it's sacred. Because it is. Number 3, you're purpose-driven. You don't just want to feel good. You want to do good. You don't just want to survive. You want to evolve. You don't just want to fit in. You want to build something that outlives you. You wake up with questions that most people avoid their entire lives. Why am I here? What am I building? Who am I becoming? And if the answers don't feel aligned, you change direction, even if it hurts, even if it costs you comfort, people, or certainty. Because staying the same is more dangerous to you than failure. You're not addicted to being right. You're addicted to becoming better. You're not moved by convenience. You're moved by alignment. That's why you've cut off people who never really hurt you, but also never really inspired you. That's why you've walked away from opportunities that paid well but drained your soul. That's why you've said no to things that looked good on paper but felt wrong in your spirit. You don't chase what glitters. You move toward what grows. You've learned to choose growth over comfort every single time. And most people won't understand that, because they'd rather stay in a situation that's familiar than step into one that's fulfilling. But you'd rather be alone building your vision than surrounded by people who don't even know what a vision is. Purpose-driven people are intimidating, not because they're arrogant, but because they expose everything fake. They expose laziness without saying a word. They expose mediocrity by living with intention. They expose dishonesty just by telling the truth. You don't have to try to stand out. You just have to be yourself. The world isn't used to that. People expect you to follow the script. Get a job you hate. Go out on weekends. Say yes when you mean no. Complain but never change. Numb the pain but never heal. You refuse. You'd rather start over than sell out. You'd rather lose everyone than lose yourself. You'd rather be misunderstood than manipulated. Because when you live with purpose, every yes is sacred. Every no is protection. Every hour is an investment. And when you operate at that level of clarity, people either rise with you or fall away from you. You no longer chase, you attract. Not because you play games, but because you play truth. You've stopped negotiating your peace. You've stopped explaining your worth. You've stopped trying to be liked by people who don't even like themselves. Because your path isn't for everyone. It's not supposed to be. You don't need a crowd. You need clarity. You don't need noise. You need alignment. You don't need praise. You need peace. Number 4. Your energy attracts quality. You've spent too long trying to be liked by people who never saw you. You've poured into others hoping they'd pour back. You've lowered your volume so others could feel louder. You've smiled through disappointment, hoping they'd finally understand you. But now, you're done with that. You're done begging to be understood. You're done offering your loyalty to people who see you as a convenience. You're done auditioning for roles you never wanted, because now you know your presence is expensive, your peace is sacred, your energy is gold, and not everyone deserves access. You attract what you tolerate. And now that your tolerance for the fake has dropped, your standards have risen. You don't chase anymore. You filter. You filter based on energy, based on consistency, based on integrity. If someone's presence feels like pressure, you let them go. If their words don't align with their actions, you distance. If their vibe drains you, they're not your tribe. You no longer bond over trauma. You bond over vision. You don't keep people around just because of history. You choose them based on who they are today. You've learned that most connections are seasonal, that loyalty without reciprocity is slavery, that availability is not affection, and that just because someone misses you doesn't mean they value you. So you don't respond to guilt texts. You don't return to what broke you. You don't explain your worth to people committed to misunderstanding you. You attract quality because you've become quality. And that means people will be uncomfortable around you, not because you're rude, but because your standards make them question theirs. You walk with purpose, and they wander. You speak with clarity, and they stutter. You move with intention, and they stall. And your presence reminds them of the work they're avoiding. So they fall off, they ghost, they criticize. Let them. Because their absence makes space for alignment. And alignment is the highest form of abundance. Now your life isn't full, it's focused, not crowded, but curated. You don't need more, you need meaningful. And the moment you stop chasing love and start becoming love, you stop needing permission to be at peace. You stop needing constant reassurance. You stop needing approval, because now you're rooted, anchored, clear. You've stopped bleeding for people who wouldn't even hand you a bandage, and you've started loving yourself with the same loyalty you once begged for, and that's power. If you've made it this far, I ask you to do 2 things. First, support this channel. By liking, subscribing, and commenting, you make it possible for this message to reach someone else who's barely holding it together, someone who needs this truth. Second, apply this. Don't just watch this video and scroll away. Take it seriously. Use this message as a turning point. Declutter your life. Define your standards. Guard your time like it's treasure. Become someone your future self would thank. Comment below, "Solitude is power." That will tell me you're not just here to listen, you're here to live it.